So today's class will be on health issues in construction. So previously all these weeks you would have seen lot of safety issues. Primarily I was focusing on the fatal four: falls, electrocution, cave in, struck by or caught in between, and after that now we will see on health issues. So now where are these health hazards coming from, and what are the different types of health hazards a worker is exposed to? So construction workers are always exposed to a variety of health hazards, and these health hazards are primarily changing from craft to craft. So from in brick masonry you have different sort of a health hazard, and in concreting you may have a different sort of a health hazard, maybe awkward posture, cement dermatitis, okay, noise or pollution, dust. So there can be so many hazards, okay, changing from one trade to another trade, or from one job to another job, and even in the same day by the change in the timing, okay, you may have different hazards you are actually exposed to. And the exposure to one hazard is not like permanent, it can be of short duration, it can likely to repeat after some point of time. So repetition and all these are also possible. And most of these exposures, now you should be very careful in listening to this, most of these exposure are not created by some of the activities which the worker is doing, but because the worker is standing in the midst of so many activities which are taking place in a construction site, the worker is actually exposed to different sort of health hazards, okay. It need not be the hazard induced by the activity done by the worker, which we call it as a bystander exposure, in the sense the worker is standing in the site, and maybe there is an equipment, a drilling equipment is going on next by, close to where the worker is operating something, or there may be some vibration activity going on in the site. So these are all different sort of activities which are going on in the site, and as a result the worker may be exposed to noise, pollution or dust or something, okay. So that has to be taken care of. Now what is the health hazard? Every hazard is not the same. So the severity of a health hazard depends on how much time the worker is exposed to, which we call it as a duration of exposure, and what is the health hazard all about, and what is the component of the health hazard the worker has by mistakenly, okay, consumed or something. And some of these health hazards can be rectified if the workers are wearing a proper PPE. For example, a proper respirator or a mask can easily prevent the workers from inhaling all the dust, or maybe the toxic gases, fumes or vapor present in the construction site. If he wears a proper hearing protection, all these noise induced sounds can be minimized. So there are some PPEs which can at least minimize the hazard to a worker. Now factors which influence or which promote these health risks in a worker are constantly changing job environments and conditions. So what happens is, in due course of time, if a worker is picking out some infection or some disease or some hazard, health hazard, they do not even have a clue on from where they picked out and what has happened, and from which contractor he was working under, or from which type of a project he was working under, because many of these health hazards it takes ages, okay. 2, 3 years or maybe 5 years or even 10 years down the line you pick up all these infections. So diversity of work activities, and all these years there is no chance that this worker was working on the same job only. He would have changed his job routine from projects to projects because of multiple contractors, subcontractors. So even the worker himself would not have done the same activity, but he would have picked the infections because of the bystander exposures, okay. Because he is standing in the midst of so many activities which are going on in a site, he would have picked out so many infections. And the other issue is unskilled workers. Many of these workers are not even aware of what is the problem or what is the hazard they are going to bear in their lifetime if they are not wearing a proper PPE. For example, you should wear a proper safety shoes and even your proper gloves, so that the cement and other particles are not getting into your skin and getting in, it's not in contact with your skin and other issues. So most of these awareness, if the worker is not is really clear of, okay, because of their ignorance or because of their education issues, so what happens is they pick out all these infections slowly into the construction sites. The next is what are the different hazards, okay, which are primarily in a construction site. So I am just going to pick out few of the occupations in the construction site and the potential health hazards. For example, brick masons, stone masons, cement dermatitis, awkward postures, heavy loads. Carpenters or plasterers, noise, awkward postures, heavy loads, repetitive motion. Drywall installers, again plaster dust, heavy loads, awkward postures. Electricians, heavy metals in solder fumes, again awkward postures, heavy loads, asbestos dust. Then pipe fitters, plumbers, lead fumes and particles, welding fumes, again asbestos dust. Carpet layers, knee trauma, awkward postures and so on. Drillers, again silica dust, whole body vibration, noise. Then you have highway and street construction workers, asphalt emissions, heat stress, diesel engine exhaust. Then hazardous waste workers, heat stress, toxic chemicals, excavating and loading machine operators, silica dust, whole body vibration, heat stress, noise and so on. I have highlighted few of the hazards in some colors, okay, to show that there are many health hazards which are there in most of these operations. For example, awkward postures you find almost in every activity in construction work, starting from brick masons, stone masons, carpenters, then drywall installers, then carpet layers, insulation workers, you find almost everywhere. If you look at heavy load, handling heavy loads, it's again there with brick masons, stone masons, carpenters, drywall installers, then electricians, is almost there. Heat stress, most of these work are done primarily in the open environment. Obviously you may have heat stress. Anyway, our country is not, is primarily in the cold region, otherwise cold stress also has to be taken care of. So most of these are primarily ergonomics related, which we will see in the next lecture. So today's lecture we will talk about the different types of health hazards. Okay. So there are actually 4 types of health hazards which the researchers have broadly classified, starting from physical, chemical, biological and ergonomic. So ergonomics alone is a very vast topic which we will see in the next lecture. So today's lecture we will primarily discuss about physical, chemical and biological. And also keep in mind, not just a single health hazard is seen in any construction work, it is always a combination of all these works, and ergonomic is the most frequently occurring construction hazard. And if you look at the statistics on injury statistics, many of these injuries are primarily related to ergonomic hazards only. Okay. And right now the trend is ergonomic related hazards are actually even number 1 compared to even the fatal force in construction sites. Okay. Now physical, so the physical hazards, so primarily you have the whole body vibration or a hand arm vibration. Whole body vibration primarily when you do excavation, loading work and so on. Hand arm vibration primarily when you are vibrating and making the concrete penetrate into the reinforcements. So there you may have the hand arm vibration. So whatever it is, the vibration is one of the hazard which is just which is affects the human system, primarily the nervous system of any human being. So whole body vibration occurs primarily in large mobile equipments. It can be excavators, primarily any type of excavators, or drillers, air hammers, pile drivers, tractors, graders and so on. Hand arm vibration using handheld power tools such as pneumatic drills or hammers and so on, and also with the vibrators. and this can cause carpal tunnel syndrome, a disease which affects the fingers and the hands, and in the long run it may have even loss of sense and touch in the sense organs. And when you are working in extreme hot or cold temperature, it can have severe impacts as well. So, physical hazards, temperature extreme. So, the change in body temperature due to extreme weather environment, it can lead to either stress or illness, either from your cold or from your heat environment. And if you don't treat both heat stress or cold stress, are generally they are life threatening situations. Sources of hot conditions: prolonged work under direct sunlight in summer, for example asphalt paving or roofing in summer, wearing improper protective clothes when doing heavy work, working in an enclosed area, for example where heat is generally produced, for example confined spaces and so on, or maybe in an enclosed cab where the equipment operators are working without proper ventilation and sufficient respiratory systems there. Sources of cold conditions: cold air temperatures, rain, snow, etc. can also aggravate. Windy conditions or underground construction work can also be some of these situations. Now, let us discuss about heat stress. So, heat stress can result in several different health hazards, starting from heat stroke, heat exhaustion, heat cramps and so on, and there are other types also. Okay. So, heat stroke, it is a condition in which the body becomes unable to control its temperature and can cause death or permanent disability. Symptoms can be confusion, loss of coordination, hot, dry skin or profuse sweating, throbbing headache, seizures and so on, and primarily you have to go for first aid immediately. And if the worker is not responding, then you may have to go take the worker to a medical physician. Heat exhaustion, the body's response to an excessive loss of water and salt, usually through sweating. Symptoms can be rapid heartbeat, heavy sweating, extreme weakness or fatigue. Sometimes if it continues or prolongs, you may have dizziness, nausea, vomiting and so on. Primarily first aid treatment should be advisable, and then make the worker rest in a cool place, give him lot of water and other cool beverages so that the temperature is controlled. Heat cramps, when the workers are doing a very heavy strenuous activity, especially in a very hot summer, and the workers can sweat a lot, and this sweating depletes the body salt and moisture level. Symptoms can be muscle cramps, pain or spasms in the abdomen, arms or legs. So, first aid, and the worker has to be stopping all the work and rest in a cool place, and again medical attention is required if the worker is slowly responding. Heat rashes, skin irritation caused by sweat that does not evaporate from the skin, and it is a most common problem in hot environment. Sometimes you may also see blisters along with the rashes. Symptoms: clusters of red bumps on the skin, which is primarily called an rash or a blister. And next is cold stress. Again there are so many different varieties are here. So, we will be talking about hypothermia, frostbite and immersion or trench foot. Hypothermia, it occurs when the body heat is lost faster than it could be replaced, and the normal body temperature drops to less than the normal which is 95 degrees. Moderate to severe symptoms. So, when the body temperature starts falling off, symptoms will start worsening, shivering will start happening, and the person may be unable to walk, stand, the pupils became dilated, and the pulse and breathing become slowed, and loss of consciousness can also occur. A person can even die if no proper medical attention is given to the worker. First aid has to be given, move the worker to a warm place and then dry place, and you have to give him adequate blankets and so on, so that the worker is comfortable and he is recovering from the hypothermia. Frostbite, it is primarily an injury that is caused by freezing of the skin and the underlying tissues, and the lower the temperature, the more quicker the bite occurs. So, it primarily affects your hands and the legs, and the amputation may be required in some cases if the damage is very severe. Symptoms can be reddened skin develops, which is grey with white patches. Numbness may be there in the affected part and you feel firm or hard, and the blisters can also be seen in all these places. First aid, do not rub or try to burst out all these blisters. You have to apply water and clean the blisters, and not to break the blisters, and take care of medical aids. Immersion or trench foot, it is primarily caused by prolonged exposure to wet and cold temperatures. Non-freezing injury occurs because wet feet lose heat 25 times faster than a dry feet. So, to prevent this heat loss, the body starts contracting the blood cells to shut down the circulation in the feet, and as a result the skin tissue begins to die, and because of lack of oxygen and nutrients, and in the symptoms can be redness of skin, swelling, numbness and blisters. The next physical hazard is noise. So, noise is primarily reduced at a greater distance if you are from the source, okay. But what happens is, in construction site, even if some other activity is going on and you can be away from, but since there are so many activities going on in a site, especially in a very congested site, you do not have enough place to get away from the noise coming out in the construction sites. And individuals exposed to excessive noise over prolonged periods of time will have diminished hearing capacity, and if you do not treat or if you do not use a proper hearing protection, it may become permanent hearing loss. So, hearing protection, wherever required, you have to wear a proper hearing protection, because judging a noise level, whether it is safe or unsafe or has it exceeded the nominal level and so on, it is very difficult to judge. So, several factors which influence the noise levels where the workers are exposed can be type of equipment that is operated, condition or maintenance of the equipment, other equipment running at the same time. Sometimes there can be 3 or 4 equipment which are even above the normal permissible level which an ear should hear, and you may be seeing so many equipments running along, okay. Enclosed or partially enclosed spaces. So, high noise levels can be sporadic in construction. So, damage to hearing is cumulative, but exposure limits are based on primarily 8-hour averages. Noise levels. Noise levels are generally measured in decibels, and that chart as given from OSHA we will see here. So, normal conversation is primarily 60 to 65 decibels. When you are yelling at someone, when you are shouting at a very high pitch, the noise levels is primarily 80 to 85 decibels. And what does OSHA say is the permissible noise levels exposure. It ranges from 8 hours, 90 decibels in the normal, 90 decibels continuously you hear for 8 hours, it is normal for your ears. 6 hours, 92 decibels. So, primarily when the noise impact is too much, then the time exposure should also be minimal. 4 hours 95, 3 hours 97, 2 hours 100 and so on. 15 minutes is 115 decibels. Okay, and also the same noise when you are far away from the source, the sound actually starts diminishing. Okay, so when you are at 1 feet you could hear 110 decibels, the same sound when you are 2 feet away you will hear 104 decibels. When you are actually 4 feet it is 98 decibels, and as and when you move ahead of to 64 feet actually it starts diminishing to 74 decibels, and when it is 128 feet you hear only till 68 decibels. So, there is a proportion of distance and so on. Suppose if you have a spacious construction site, then you should think of keeping the bystander exposures at least away from the source of sounds. And what are the equipments which is seen in the construction site which has a very high noise levels, which is above the yelling noise? Okay, backhoe generally has 85 decibels, bulldozer 87 decibels, chops are 92 decibels, front end loader is 90, nail gun 97, router is 90, welding equipment is 92, grader or scraper is 107, forklift is 93, then chainsaw is 110, and So, whispered noise is 30 and normal conversation is 60. So, this is how the different noise which is heard or seen in a construction site as measured in decibels. So, now you cannot avoid working in with any of the equipments in construction site, even as a bystander exposure or as an operator. The one thing which you can do is at least try to wear a proper hearing protection, so that the noise levels are not impacting your ears. The hearing protection we have discussed earlier along with the PPEs. So, you have ear muffs, ear plugs or canal caps. Okay, there are a lot of varieties of ear protection are coming these days, and mere cotton will not serve the purpose of the noise protection in your ears. So far we have discussed physical hazards. So, physical hazards starting from your vibration, whole body vibration and hand arm vibration, temperature extremes, heat and cold extremes, then noise we have seen. The next hazard is chemical hazards. Chemical hazards can come in different forms. Okay, how do you take in the chemicals into your body? So, it can be in the form of dust or fumes or fibers, it can be in the form of liquids or mist, it can also be in the form of gases or vapors. Chemicals are found in different byproducts used in the construction sites, not just one or two. So many chemicals are used for different parts of the construction building. So, workers may be exposed to all these chemicals primarily when they are doing the construction activities. Examples of chemicals: asbestos, lead, silica, carbon monoxide, cadmium, welding fumes, spray paints, cutting of mist, then solvents, hexavalent chromium and so on. So, now let us discuss one after the other. Where is the source, how is it inhaled or how is it entering into the body, what are the different hazards it causes and so on. Chemical hazards, number one that we have to note down is what is the route of entry for all these chemical hazards. There are four forms, minimum four forms at which these chemicals enter into your human being. Okay. Number one is inhalation. So, inhalation is nothing but breathing in. Okay, so, when you are breathing air, along with the air, some of these chemicals in the form of dust or fumes in the vapor state can enter into the human beings. The next is ingestion. Ingestion is accidentally you are swallowing while you are eating, drinking or smoking. So, primarily when without washing your hands or without completely cleaning your hands, if you have taken some food or if you have tried to drink something and by mistake you take away all these chemicals also inside. Absorption, it can be absorbed through contact with the skin or eyes. Injection, so a chemical can enter the body when the skin is punctured, maybe you had a little scratch or something. So, as a result you had entered this chemical, or maybe through some cuts or punctures, then you are actually taken up the hazard also into your body. So, these health effects are primarily of two categories, one is acute, other one is chronic. Acute implies the effects are seen very immediately within a short span of time following the exposure, maybe minutes or hours, and sometimes even death can also happen. And some of these chronic usually develops very slowly, it takes even 5 years, 10 years, sometimes even 15, 20 years or even more. And primarily what happens is you would have had this exposure very frequently and repeatedly over a prolonged period of time, and that is where you would have caught up all these infections. Now, how is the measurement when you talk about chemical hazard, how is the measurement done? Chemical hazards are generally measured in terms of different units. Okay, we call it as a units of concentration: ppm, mg per meter cube, micrograms per meter cube, or fibers per meter cube. Okay, and if you fibers per cubic centimeters, ppm is nothing but parts per million. So, how do you define or how do you assess this parts per million? Maybe 4 or 5 drops of a chemical in a 55 gallon drum of water is primarily called 1 part per million. Milligrams per cubic meter of air, it is primarily 1 mg in 1 cubic meter of air. 1 microgram in 1 cubic meter of air, and fibers again it means a particulate form of asbestos. So, 5 micrometer or longer, and which is just in 1 cubic centimeter of air. Okay. A respirable dust is primarily example lead, silica and asbestos, and so these are actually in terms of micro is very small microns, and in millimeter microns you have your fibers. Okay, there is primarily size of a human hair. Okay. Then fumes, dust, mists, okay, so they are also in terms of 1 microns to in primarily and hair visible sizes. Okay. So, fumes are actually invisible, and dust and mists you could really see because of the color or the order from which you can really see. What are the different gases which are primarily seen in a construction site or used to perform some construction activities? Number 1, oxygen. Oxygen is used for welding and cutting. Acetylene is also used for welding and cutting. Propane is used for heating and fuel. Carbon dioxide is used as an inert gas and can be found naturally in sewers. Methane, it is a principal component of natural gas and found in earth deposits. Hydrogen sulfide, it is a breakdown of organic matter and found naturally in sewers. Carbon monoxide, highly toxic and also is seen in the construction sites. Then welding gases, diesel exhaust, primarily the nitrogen dioxide. So, the gases primarily there are 2 types, one is simple asphyxiant, another one is a chemical asphyxiant. Simple asphyxiant is like exposure in primarily in a suffocating plastic bag. Assume that you are inside a plastic bag and the suffocation, that is primarily called an simple asphyxiant. Chemical asphyxiant will have a chemicals also along with the suffocation. Number 1 is carbon monoxide, it is generally called as a silent killer, and the next one is hydrogen sulfide. It is also called rotten eggs because the smell of the hydrogen sulfide is primarily equivalent to a rotten egg smell. Okay. And hydrogen sulfide is generally colorless, but it is very poisonous, and also it is a flammable gas, and it generally starts happening because of the bacterial growth. Okay, and because of the absence of oxygen, and most often this is found in sewers and manholes. Okay, now what is the concentration of carbon monoxide and what is the health effect? Very less percentage of volume of air of carbon monoxide, you generally have a headache or mild fatigue in just 2 to 3 hours, but 0.1 to primarily 1200 ppm of carbon monoxide, headache, dizziness, nausea in 20 minutes, sometimes unconsciousness, collapse and possibly even death in next 2 hours. Hydrogen sulfide, 0.0002 percentage of volume of concentration, which is nothing but 0.02 ppm. Okay. The odor can be detected by normal human nose. Okay. And when the ppm level is 10, irritation of the eyes, nose and throat. When the ppm level goes to 100, severe respiratory tract irritation, eye irritation, convulsions, coma and sometimes even death in severe cases. So, this is all about on the asphyxiants. The next is fumes. Where are the fumes found in construction? It can be seen in welding fumes, welding activities, asphalt and lead. Welding activities, it contains variety of chemicals depending on what is welded, what chemical is used, because there are so many types of welding activities are there. Okay, welding rods, fluxes, shielding gases. It can irritate the skin, eyes, nose, causing an immediate health effect. The fumes can easily pass through the lungs into the bloodstream, resulting in a systematic health effect. So, you should wear always a proper PPE in order to not inhale the fumes into your body. And generally welding in confined spaces or welding on stainless steel can also produce hexavalent chromium, which is very dangerous and hazardous. Okay. So, health effects of hexavalent chromium, lung cancer, irritation or damage to the nose, throat, eyes, skin and so on. Asphalt is made from petroleum, headache, skin rash, sensitization, throat, eye irritations and so on, and you should wear a proper PPE. The next is lead fumes, lead poisoning, loss of appetite, nausea, vomiting, stomach cramps and so on. And cast iron joints and fittings, generally you see lot of lead fumes, and use electric pot so that you are avoiding the lead coming out of the air. So, now we have discussed about fumes. Now, dusts and fibers. Dust are nothing but solid particles suspended in the air, and they may be produced by crushing, grinding, or maybe due to sanding or sawing, and because of some activity or the other that you do in the construction site. So, the different dust and fiber forms you see are crystalline silica, quartz and asbestos. Crystalline silica, so silica or the quartz dust is primarily very hazardous, and it is very common and exposure in construction site. So, the exposure to excessive silica dust can cause lung scarring and lung disease over some period of time. Silicosis is a common disease of the lungs due to the breathing of dust which contains the crystalline silica particles, and so far there is no cure for silicosis. Exposures can be concrete cutting, sand blasting for surface preparation, crushing and drilling rocks for concreting, masonry and concrete work, then mining, tunneling work, demolition work, cement, asphalt pavement and so on. Respiratory protection must be used in conjunction with other safety practices. Primarily you may have to have a wet sort of a cutting and mixing in the construction site. Quartz, it is generally produced from sand, gravel, clay or granite and other forms of rock. Smaller particles can be inhaled very deep into the lungs and can cause damage. Asbestos, exposure during demolition or remodeling jobs, and what happens is the infection can cause asbestosis or mesothelioma, which is a rare form of cancer that develops from the protective lining that covers many of the body's internal organs. Next is biological hazard, primarily in terms of microorganisms or plant toxins. Microorganisms can be fungus, bacteria, virus and mold. Plant toxins can be poison oak or poison stings. Biological hazards, exposures can occur primarily during demolition work, renovation work, sewer treatments or work on air handling systems and so on. And primarily when you are contacting and disease carrying organisms or a plant along with the soil exposure, water exposure or directly with the insects or bird or bat droppings, animals or old unsafe or unhealthy structures. And if you take off the poisonous plants, poison ivy or poison oak and so on, contact with that primarily in the soil can also give you contact dermatitis, which is primarily itches along with the rashes. So, in biological hazard, the one very hazardous is moles. Okay, moles litigation is still increasing and expensive even till date. Mold is seen everywhere, indoors, outdoors and so on. The minute you have a lot of moisture and oxygen, mold starts growing and it is a very unhealthy situation. Okay, and you see in every, even after construction you may see so many of these molds coming in, and molds are primarily visible in demolition structures. Okay, primarily when the workers are trying to demolish a structure where molds are there, then they pick up all those hazards. There are thousands of mold species and not all of them are really dangerous, but there are some molds which are really dangerous to human beings. Molds will grow when there is moisture, moderate temperature and a food source. What is a mold exposure? When the mold's materials are damaged or dispersed, the mold spores or products are generally released into the air, and some of these molds, they produce toxic chemicals which we call it as a mycotoxins, and that contaminate with the air. And what happens when you inhale the spores, or the spores may contact your skin, then you start getting all the molds infections. So, not all the mold exposures are dangerous, primarily depends on the resistivity level or your hygiene level of your body and your immune system. You generally pick up those infections with the molds. Precaution: try not to accumulate water, clean up all your water system so that you are very clean with no mold growing up. Whenever there is a leak in the pipe or something, immediately attend on so that the molds are not growing up. Wipe all wooden types of fittings of our exposures with no water so that the molds will not have a place to grow and so on. Okay. So, with this we have discussed physical hazard, then chemical hazard and also on biological hazard. Okay. And quick recap. So, physical hazard we have discussed about whole body vibration and hand arm vibration, noise, heat extreme temperatures and cold extreme temperatures. Okay. So, we have lot of quick cards and fact sheets from OSHA which will help you to understand and list it out the different things that we have discussed. What is a heat illness, the risk factors for heat illness, symptoms for heat exhaustion, symptoms for heat stroke and how to prevent the heat stress are all seen in this OSHA quick card. Same way for cold stress, you have NIOSH fast facts on cold stress and how to protect the workers from cold stress, especially with hypothermia, frostbite and trench foot, and also what are the risk factors and how to protect yourselves. So, that is also given in the quick card. Recap again. So, this is on the physical. Then next is chemical. Chemical we have seen lot of different chemicals found in terms of dust, fibers or vapors or are in gas forms and liquid forms. And if you see, so we have discussed about hexavalent chromium, silica, then asbestos, quartzine crystals. Okay, we have discussed so many chemicals which are seen in construction sites. Okay, and we have also discussed about asbestosis, silicosis, then carbon monoxide and so on. Okay, so most of these are through inhalation or contact with the skin, dermatitis problems commonly you see with all these fumes, and you have to have a proper respiratory system so that you are primarily safe. There are lot of quick cards on protect yourself from silicosis, protect yourself from lead in construction and also carbon monoxide poisoning. So, last recap is on what are the different respirators. Okay, so respiratory protection must be worn whenever you are working in hazardous atmosphere, and the appropriate respirator will depend on the contaminants to which you are exposed and the protection factor. So, there are so many types of masks. Single strap dust mask, they are not NIOSH approved, they must not be used to protect against hazardous atmospheres, but they are primarily for molds or allergens. Approved filtering face pieces which is called as a dust mask, they can be used for dust, mist, welding fumes, etc. They do not provide protection from gases or vapors, so do not use for asbestos or lead, but you can still use the same for filtering on dust and other fumes which are present in the air. Half face respirators can be used for protection against most vapors, acid gases, dust or welding fumes. Cartridges or filters must match the contaminants, and you should be also maintaining all these respirators. Full face respirators, they are more protective than the half face. They can be used for protection against most vapors, acid gases, dust or welding fumes, and this face shield can protect your face, eyes from irritants and also from the contaminants. The loose fitting powered air purifying respirators, which is often for breathing comfort from a battery or powered fan, which pulls air through the filters and circulates the air throughout the helmet or the hood, and they can be worn by most workers. The next is self-contained breath apparatus, which we call it as a SCBA. SCBA is most often used as a leading respirator recommended in construction industry. It is used for entry and escape primarily in confined zones or atmospheres that are considered immediately dangerous to life and health or oxygen deficiency. So, they have their own air tank along with the apparatus. Okay. So, this primarily on the recap, and the last one we have seen is on biological hazard. So, primarily from organisms, microorganisms or plants. Plants generally the poison ivy or poison oak, and contact dermatitis is the only one exposure hazard you may see. and especially in microorganisms there are so many types available, but we have discussed on moles. And these are the different references from where I have picked out all this material, and there is no proper standards or guidelines as to how to be healthy. But one thing is, keep in mind, when you are wearing a proper PPE, you can actually minimize the exposure on health hazard into the human body. Okay, bye.